You know, the Grandma had to laugh about the title, What Does It Mean to Be Green? Somebody of my generation grew up watching the Muppet movie, and every time I hear that, all I can think of is Kermit the Frog singing that song. Clearly in our day and time, nobody is thinking about Kermit the Frog singing about how tough it is to be green. And for those of you who have been actively engaged in the study about what it means to be green, I'm sure you now recognize, as we at City Hall have recognized, that it is an incredibly complex idea about what eco-friendliness can be and environmental sustainability. Traditionally, people talk about greenhouse gas emissions and energy usage. Those are the two hot topics, sexy topics. But if you really want to think about sustainability and environmental friendliness, you really need to weigh lots of different factors. The effects of each of our personal choices on water pollution and land use and biodiversity. And all of a sudden, when you start doing that and you weigh all of these factors into place, you realize that it is very, very complicated to make a determination about what is actually smart and sustainable. One of my favorite columnists writes for Slate Magazine, and the name of the column is The Green Lantern. And they write these quirky articles about, how green is tofu. Well, it turns out it's actually not as green as you would think. If you are substituting tofu for meat, it's very green. If you are, though, substituting tofu for meat that is grown within a 100-mile radius of your house, or raised within a 100-mile radius of your house, actually buying tofu that is largely made in Asian countries and flown over here and processed with energy, not so green. One of my favorites, particular favorite now given the position I have, is, does road salt harm the environment? And the answer is, it absolutely does. It gets into the watershed. And in this column, I was pleased to see that they were talking about these progressive solutions of beet juice and other salty mixes that we in the city have been trying to implement. Unfortunately, they're nowhere near as effective as road salt is. And so for the time being, given the climate that we have and the issues that we have, we are going to continue to use road salt. We believed, probably since January, that a smooth transition from an oil-based economy to renewable fuels was possible. But what I have begun to believe is that given what has happened with British Petroleum and what the chaos that we are just starting to see but will inevitably get worse, that smooth transition is no longer available, and that the market itself is going to drive these changes. We obviously see the environmental disaster that the oil spill is causing. It obviously highlights, I think, the weaknesses in the phrase that was very popular 2 years ago in the campaign of drill, baby, drill. And it obviously shows that we are driven by our need for this oil, and yet we are doing things that really do not act in our long-term interest, relying on places like the Persian Gulf and Venezuela and Nigeria and Russia to get that oil that drives our economy. And here in our region, we are going to very soon be ground zero for this discussion. Because one of the things that everybody talks about in sustainability is the fact that while you can't, wind and solar power and renewables can get you a fraction of the power that you need, natural gas is seen as this nirvana. And natural gas is the way that we should transition our economy. Well, natural gas here has meant the discussion about hydrofracking. And hydrofracking has meant that we have to have a discussion about what it means for our watershed, because that's where the hydrofracking discussion is happening. I was pleased to be united with Mayor Bloomberg, not just in our similar height, because by the way, we are the exact same height, as is Richard Daley. That Saturday Night Live routine where Michael Dukakis or George Bush said, vote for me because I'm tall. I'm telling you, vote for mayors that are short because they are the leaders of this generation. But Michael Bloomberg in New York City, went to war with New York State over hydrofracking in their watershed. We joined along New York City and their sizable resources to say, no, we're not going to allow or not participate and strongly argue against hydrofracking in the Marcellus watershed in Skaneateles Lake because of the drinking water that it supplies. And we were able to, in partnership, get a moratorium for the time being on hydrofracking. Think about what has happened in the Gulf with not enough thought about drilling and not enough thought about how you solve problems when they occur. What would happen to us locally if we had hydrofracking, we had chemicals get into our water supply? We have to look in our backyards and our own choices to see what are the most effective ways to be green. And really what that means for us in the city and city leadership is how do we promote a sustainable way of life? We know that a car-dependent national culture with a globalized economy and sprawl in suburbs is not the future. And I'm convinced that the future is cities, particularly small cities like Syracuse. That's because when you talk about density for a city, it is obviously always much greener. People walk more, they bike more, they're less car dependent, there's more public transportation as a rule, and all of those things are smart, green, environmentally sustainable decisions. To rebuild and revitalize is a much greener choice than to start a building from the ground up. Those are choices that we are making in our housing policy. They are choices that we are making every day with the policies that we have. Looking at developing areas first and foremost in downtown to talk about revitalizing the density there, and also our neighborhood commercial corridors to revitalize the density there, and to then give people who live in those neighborhoods an option to go to the post office on James Street if they want, to go to the Palace Theater to see a movie, to go to the Books and Cafe on James Street to have a cup of coffee and buy a book there. Those are the kind of things that when we look at economic development and housing policy, that we're making sure we are preeminently focused on. When you think about the farmers market that is downtown, that is an incredibly environmentally sustainable and healthy public policy event that we do. And part of what we are charged with is making it so that people understand that it's not just a quaint thing to do, but it actually makes sense for our entire region to buy your fruits and vegetables there. We are making local agriculture a focal point of our city with things like the farmers market and other issues, all towards this idea of having a smaller carbon footprint. We are also looking at public transportation choices and being a partner in Centro, among other entities, and looking at public transportation as the sustainable way for our city to grow and be revitalized. We in the city have also done some fairly easy things. We are in the process of developing a citywide bike lane. We are working with the county and the county executive to promote smart growth as opposed to suburban sprawl, which has immense costs. We are working with the county on the county sustainable development plan. We are promoting green building through our tax exemption programs in the Economic Development Office. The Joint School Construction Board has voted to move forward with designing the 4 schools for renovation to be designed and built up to LEED Silver standard, which is a unique opportunity that we have had, and yet everybody said around that table that it was a priority. So even though it was more expensive, that we should move forward that area. We are a pilot community for Greening USA's implementation of the 12 traits of sustainability. We are working with a class of Maxwell School graduate students to develop a climate action plan and a comprehensive sustainability plan for Syracuse. We are working within our zoning regulations to have regulations which will allow the use of wind turbines in the city. And we are also doing the non-sexy but very important actions of upgrading our energy efficiency in our buildings and some of our park facilities. To finish where I started, which was the question, what does it mean to be green? I think what it means is to make conscious choices about consumption, and it means to reevaluate priorities, where you look at quality of life as not just your house and not just your street, not just your neighborhood, but the entire planet. And to make choices consistent with that. And the beauty of being where I am and we are right now is that if we all make those choices, we are aligning our city and our community to be at the forefront of the environmental sustainability movement, which will also mean more jobs and more opportunity for everyone.